A year ago, I got married to the woman who I thought was the love of my life. Now, after fleeing the country, I have chosen to file for divorce and walk away from my marriage. From the betrayal to the death threats, the insults and the lawsuits, I'm gonna explain and show you guys why I ultimately made the decision to walk away from my marriage. I remember the first years of the relationship being some of the happiest in my life. I can't say exactly what it was that made me love my wife so much, but I just felt such a great sense of peace and love, not just from her, but from the whole entire church community. And I think that was a really big factor actually in me choosing to be with my wife, because I was so in love with the community and how they treated me and how they welcomed me with open arms. They sold me on all these amazing ideas of Jesus loves you, this is what Jesus would want. All the bad, negative stereotypes that I had about religion just went out the door. But I remember feeling a very strong sensation and feeling from God telling me that this woman was going to be my wife. And now I understand that the whole purpose of the marriage and the wedding was to bring my family back together again. My family came from the US, and I was able to resolve all the issues that I had with my dad and my mom and my sister. And we had a really beautiful reconnection and we hugged it out. It was an amazing experience. I don't regret the marriage at all. I think that a strength that I have that is also kind of a weakness is that I'm a very adaptable person. You can put me in any environment and I'll find a way to make friends and fit in. And I think when I was doing that, I may have given off the impression that I wanted to be this amazing Christian man for the rest of my life and dedicate myself to Christ and all that stuff. I'm trying to think if I gave off that impression, or the community and my wife had such strong expectations on me that they kind of projected them on me, and those were the only things that they saw. Being an Asian man, I think a lot of Asians can relate to this. We grew up with a huge lack of love in our households. We're always constantly told how we're doing everything wrong. Our parents never really say that they're proud of us or that they love us. It's always, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you getting better? And I think in a lot of ways, that's just their way of expressing love, because that's how our grandparents were to them. Growing up in the US and seeing how other families treated their kids, it left a huge hole in my heart and a longing for the love that I saw in other families. I may have picked being with my wife because I was more in love with the stability and the feeling of love that I got from their whole entire community. Finally being in an environment where you're treated like someone who's appreciated, right? And someone who's loved. There's only 3 ways you can really get to know a person. You have sex with them, you travel together, or you live together. And because I wasn't able to do any of those, I don't think that if we dated a year more, this all could have been avoided. Everything that showed up in our relationship were things that showed up after we got married, and when she felt the security that I was never going to leave, because she had the full support of the whole community on her side. And it wasn't until after the proposal where things started going downhill. So I remember 2 months before the wedding, we were fighting quite a bit. I felt that I was dating the church more than I was dating her. She would always prioritize the opinions of the people of the church and what the church thought over my needs and wants as the boyfriend and the husband in my marriage. For example, I could not go out to any bars or clubs because if I were seen there, it would reflect poorly on her and the people at church would say something. I could not go attend other church services because she was a leader at her church, and if somebody caught me at another church, it would make her look bad. And it got to the point where when I was by myself going to the gym, I was fearful of interacting with any woman whatsoever, for fear of if somebody saw me, what would they tell my wife, or how would this come back to me? I just wanted to avoid as many problems as possible. We decided to sit down with the pastor for marriage counseling right before we got married. We actually did that several times before we got married. I think we did it starting from 6 months before the wedding. Every single month we would meet with the pastor, and I would have meetings with the pastor by myself as well. After we told him the situation, he told us that it's apparent that love is here and we care about each other, but if we continue down this path, the marriage is not going to work. Me, Wes, I have to fully agree and be on board with everything that they teach at the church. If not, that's okay, I should walk away. But by marrying my wife, I am accepting that this is the path that I want to take. And I guess looking back, this is probably the point where I should have walked away. I can admit that this was maybe cowardly behavior on my part, but it was very difficult because I had so many things on my mind. Being in a foreign country with no family, not knowing the language, not having any stability. I had the potential of losing all the stability and community that I built in Manizales. I would have everybody on the church turn on me, which going through the divorce now has clearly shown me. If you ever gone to a new place and set up roots, you understand how daunting and exhausting it is. Finally, when I found like a good area of stability and people who I felt loved me, it was really hard to give that up. Plus the pressure of what everybody in the church was going to think, and the fact that my family, all of them bought tickets already to come to the wedding. There was just a lot of things going through my head. So my wife and I, we talked about it, and we came to the conclusion that because of love, we're going to fight through it, and we're going to try to negotiate everything as the marriage progressed, right? Because we love each other. I've never said this openly on my channel, but when I was courting my wife, there was another man who I guess is like another one of her father figures. This guy, he went to jail in the US for narco trafficking. Now he's a reformed Christian and everything. He came up to me one day and just took me aside and is like, hey, look, like if anything bad were to happen to Anna, he gave me like the gun fingers and he put it on my chest. He's like, I'm going to kill you. He may have said it as a joke. He may have not, but well, this guy went to jail for it, right? He could very easily do something like that again. Ultimately, I decided that I think I should go through with the marriage. I just had too much to lose. It does look like a bad decision, but I did what I believed was the best thing to do at the time.
People get unhappy in marriages the way that people go bankrupt, which is very slowly and then all at once.
So the first 6 months of our marriage were very interesting. It was the first time that either of us have ever lived with a partner before. Our co-living situation actually was pretty good. We didn't have a ton of issues. I'm firmly against yelling at my partner. I know what it's like being on the other side of that and how crappy it feels coming from somebody you love. She never raised her voice at me either. You know, it was all very cordial. But the same topic kept coming up again. Am I dating her or am I dating the church? It just always seemed that she put the needs of the church and the opinions of the people of the church over my needs as a husband and what I wanted out of the marriage. She expected me to fit neatly into her life, and she wasn't willing to compromise any of the time that she spent at the church. So the first 8 months of the relationship, she was working a full-time job. She was an accountant at the local hospital. So from Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays, she would leave at 7 in the morning and come back at generally around 6 p.m., but a lot of times at 8 p.m., sometimes at midnight, at 1, 2 in the morning because she had to work. For me, it just didn't make a lot of sense because I'm like, why are you working so hard when I'm paying most of the bills? I'm paying for like 80% of everything and I don't get to see my wife. It didn't really make sense. And then Saturdays, she would volunteer at the church because that was important to her. And then Sundays were mandatory church going days. And then afterwards we would eat with her family or with her mom or something like that. So we didn't really have any time dedicated to us or developing a relationship as a couple. And I also had a problem with the fact that every time that we would go on a date or go on a trip, I was planning all of the events. If I didn't plan anything, we would not have any time together because she would always prioritize like volunteering from the church, being at the church, being at those services, but she never really put our relationship as a priority. Even the honeymoon, right? We were gone for a month and I paid and planned for every single detail on that honeymoon, where we would go, her visa situation, all of the plane tickets, all of the Airbnbs, the tours, everything. I did everything. When I would be waiting at home for her to come back, I'm like, what do I do? Do I go out and try to meet people? But if I'm not hanging out with people from the church, I'm gonna get shit from my wife and she's gonna have a problem with that. You know, I want to go out and go dancing, but then I know she'll have a problem with that as well. Just to avoid having more issues with my wife, I just decided to stay home. And this is why I started smoking weed again, because I was at home and I'm like, well, I don't know what time my wife's gonna come home. I can't really go out. So what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna smoke weed and play video games because I have no other way to de-stress. So if she had to work in order for us to pay the bills, I think it would have been a different story. So this is why I eventually asked her to quit her job, because I was like, if the church is something that you're not going to negotiate, then I would rather you get a part-time job so I can actually see my wife and spend more time with her. Because a lot of times it doesn't even really feel like I have a wife. And I started noticing that when we would have disagreements, we would talk about the things that we would need and want in a relationship. So she'll tell me that as a Christian woman, these are the things that I need in my relationship. You know, I need you to spend time with my family, go to the church once or twice a week because that's important to me. I need you to show me love this way. I want you to be the provider of the household. I'm shy. I'm a very timid person, so you need to respect my boundaries. And I'm like, okay, that's totally cool. But then every time I would try to ask something from my point of view, things that I would like as a man or things I would like for my culture, right? As soon as she disagreed with it, she would use religion as her argument for her not wanting to do it. So for example, when I told her that some Sundays I don't want to go to church because we work all week and I never get to see my wife, I would like to some Sundays for us to be able to spend some time just her and me. And then she'd be like, okay, well, it's important that we go to church at least once a week. So if we don't go on Sunday, can we go Wednesday nights or Thursday nights? And she was just so concerned about what people at the church would say if she didn't go, rather than what I was truly asking her, which was just, I wanted to spend more time with my wife. I also found that there was an unequal effort being made to understand the other person's culture. This whole entire time I was in Colombia, I had to learn a new language, adapt to a new culture, adopt a whole entire new religion, and accept all of her family as they were. And it makes me sad that in our 2.5 years together, she has still not had one conversation with my dad or my sister because she always says that her English isn't good enough. And she never learned how to make a Chinese dish. And I'm not saying that she has to be the best of cooks or that she has to be fluent, but after 2.5 years, I'm just like, if you were truly making an effort, you would have something to show for it. I remember 1 week before I went to Medellin for a business trip, my wife and I were fighting a lot. One evening, I received a text from a man from the church who was like a father figure to her and I. Wes, tonight I feel the need to write to you because you and I need to have a conversation. I need to remind you that she isn't alone and that I'm here to care for her and defend her against anyone who harms her, not only physically but mentally as well. When you decided to be with her, nobody forced you. Supposedly, as a mature person, you promised to be with her and not bring her to a life of sadness or contempt. You did it for love, and this love doesn't mean that she has to give up her values that she had since she's known you. I don't know what it's like in the home, but I'm sure that Anna would never harm anybody. We've talked about how the world is perverse and babies are born pure and the world perverts them. Anna is like a baby for the world. Why do you have to bring her into this world where you and I know there's absolutely nothing good? Unless everything that happened to you with God, where we were witnesses, was a lie. Were these 2 years of restoration a lie? I invite you to pray on your relationship and above all your relationship with God. I was angry at the man for meddling in my marriage, but I was so disgusted by the behavior of my wife. I was thinking, what the heck did you tell them to make him want to act this way? How could you go behind my back and tell only your side of the story because now they have a bad image of me? All the trust that I had in my wife vanished at that moment. Are you here in the interest of your husband? Or are you trying to get other people to pressure me into thinking that you're right? I think that in any marriage, any issues that you have are discussed in private. And when we're in public, it's you and I against the world. We're a team. But it put such a sour taste in my mouth that I was ready to pull the trigger and separate from my wife. But I didn't think that things would get to this extreme.
¿Cree que usted va a venir aquí a burlarse de todo mundo y hacer lo que le da la gana, a coger a una niña, desubicarla y luego dejarla? Sé que usted aquí en Colombia no conoce sino la parte buena, pero usted acuérdese que sabe que usted está en el país más violento del mundo, maricón hijo de puta. Yo a mi hija todavía la controlo y la mando y yo abro el Instagram y yo tengo las claves y yo por eso miro todo y mantengo pendiente de ella. Y estoy esperando que venga y ojalá me busque. No quiero cogerlo sino para matarlo, marica.
So this is the same man who sent me the threatening text message before. When I received the threat, I sent it over to my wife. The first thing that came out of her mouth was, oh man, he didn't mean that. You know, he just collapsed. He was angry in the moment. I'm just like, whose side are you on? And all the actions that happened afterwards too. Her talking bad about me to all of her friends and everybody from the church. They wrote a lot of long, horrible comments on my videos, so I eventually had to block them. Going to the immigration office to try to get my visa revoked and get me kicked out of the country. Her sneaking through my Instagram and trying to read all my messages to trying to find proof of infidelity. And all the various lawsuits that they sent at me to delete all the videos on my channel. And after this event, I realized that there was no way back, and then I had to proceed with the divorce. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that I was a perfect person because there were a lot of mistakes that I made in the relationship as well. You know, maybe I put a lot of false expectations in the beginning, and they had a image of me that wasn't who I was 100%. But I was seeing this French Colombian girl. She said that you never really get to know somebody unless you speak to them in their native language. It's true, because my personality in Spanish and my personality in English are very different. And I think they only really got to know the Spanish side of me. They never really got to see who I truly am because they never spoke to me in my home language. I wonder if it was me putting a false front up or it was them choosing to see only what they wanted to see in me. At this point, who knows? It's probably a mix of both, honestly. I'm just happy knowing that I can get out of the situation with my integrity and honor intact. I didn't do anything to dishonor God. I never cheated on her. I never hit her. I never insulted them. Even when they were doing all these things against me, I never once spoke badly about my wife on my channel or to anybody else, convincing all of her friends in that community of all the bad things that my wife did. Like, I did none of that, right? I chose to just walk away and take the high road. Right now, obviously, I'm in Thailand. I'm on the run again, and I'm trying to get my life back together. But at least I can look myself in the mirror and say that I did not sacrifice my morals or my values out of anger or out of spite in order to hurt these people who have desperately tried to hurt me in any way possible. I believe that love is a beautiful thing, but I believe that love and marriage are two completely different things. Marriage is a lot more about duty, about responsibility to your family. I wanted to share it and talk about the whole entire process because a lot of people have asked me, why did you get divorced? You seem so happy. I was happy for a long time, but there's only so much neglect and shit that you can take in a marriage before you have to say enough is enough and have the courage to walk away. Yeah, let me know if you guys have a similar experience and let me know what you guys think down below.